Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Shirley, go ahead, please.
Hi, Tom. I'm so excited to be here, and hi, everybody. So my question is a little bit different compared to the previous questions. It's about NPMR physics and PMR physics. So in your book, on page 240, you said the notion of space is derived from time by specifying a constant velocity of propagation of information. So in our PMR, we have an upper limit of fundamental quantum of time. And it is the speed of light that gives our PMR the feel of space. But in page 261, you said NPMR has no space and therefore no distance. So when we are dreaming, we are traveling to NPMR. And so when we see things or experience things over there, isn't there also a speed limit at which the information is traveling to you? Like if there was no upper limit of speed of travel for information, wouldn't everything just come at you at once and you wouldn't be able to experience or see things in NPMR?
So that's the question is time in NPMR, okay?
Yes, Planck, like in our PMR, we have Planck length, speed of light, and Planck time. So right. Planck length equal to speed of light multiplied by Planck time. So and you're saying that we have space because we experience space because there is the speed of light. So I'm saying when I go to NPMR, like when I'm lucid dreaming, I also feel space. I see colors, I hear sounds, and I can touch things. Doesn't that mean NPMR, there's also a speed at which information is traveling at?
Yeah. No, it doesn't, but yes, it does. All right, let me try to sort that out for you.
Yeah.
When you are in NPMR, you experience through your physical senses. You see things, hear things, smell things, touch things.
Yes.
And you do that because that's how you interpret the data. You can't interpret the data any way else. The way your language is, you can't think about things other than in terms of sense data, because that's the way this physical reality is. You know, we see things, we hear things, we smell things, and the things that we don't see, hear, smell, or touch are things that are invisible, the things that we're not interactive with. So if we're interactive with anything, we will express that, we will interpret that in terms of our physical senses, because that's how we think. That's how our language works. So if we just have a feeling, oh, I just got a feeling, then we don't have to translate that into physical senses. It's just a feeling. But if we want to explain it to somebody else, how we felt, then we start making translations into things that experiences that other people have. So part of that, the reason why you have all these physical senses is because that's how you interpret your data. This feels like this looked like that. Let's say you talk to someone, you're out of body, you're in the non-physical, and someone comes up and says, hello, would you like to have a conversation with me? You will immediately interpret that being as some sort of probably humanoid, some sort of thing. It's got at least a lump on top that's a head, and it's got this and that. It's got arms, it's got legs. You'll kind of see that as a humanoid just because that's your pattern for things that'll talk to you. Now, if you read a whole lot of science fiction, you might interpret it as an alien or something else, because that would be a pattern. We pattern match. We have experience, we get data, and we match that data to patterns out of our experience. So that's why you have all that physical stuff. But still, to answer your question about time in the non-physical, yes, there is time in the non-physical. The
Yeah.
non-physical time is a very fundamental quantity, and messages do take time to move around in the non-physical. It's just that it's so fast, it seems like it's instantaneous to us from our physical viewpoint, because our time is really big. Our seconds, our smallest unit of time, our delta T, our Planck time is huge compared to the delta T in the non-physical.
Yes, that answers my question. So that means there is actually space in non-physical as well, because because their information is traveling at a much faster rate than our speed of light. So there would be space there too.
Well, not really. There would be.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But
there'd be an attribute. You might call it an attribute of space, but it's not really space. And the way we create space here isn't so much because of the speed of light. The way we create space here is we define a point as the origin. Say, here's an origin, and here are 3 mutually orthogonal unit vectors. In other words, an X, Y, Z axis. That defines 3D space. So that's all you need to create space, is a point for the origin, and now 3 different directions that are all mutually perpendicular to each other, the X, the Y, and the Z axis. That then defines space everywhere, from origin out to infinity, and every direction is defined just by putting that origin in those axes. So that's how you make space. Space is a mathematical construct. It's a calculation. So in a virtual reality, that's how we have space. That's why the people in the Sims characters can get up and walk around and go in their house and out of their house, because somebody made an origin someplace, and they derive all that based on that space inside the Sims. So it's the same here, but in consciousness, there is no origin. There's no origin defined.
But I thought, when I'm in lucid dream, I have to be there for me, because my space is coming from me. I have to be present to be a point, and therefore I can see, things above, things in front, things, where I establish 3D.
Right.
So even when I go to NPMR, even if there's, how do I say, as long as I see things, or as long as there's an environment around me, it's kind of the same space as we are experiencing the same space here.
Yes, but that's because you interpret it that way.
Yes,
not because it is that way.
Okay. Yes. I get what you mean. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's the end of my first question. My other questions are all to do with physics in NPMR, because I go there. I do lucid dreams a lot. Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Jessie, please go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Jessie.
Hi, nice to meet all of you guys. I feel so excited to be here. It feels like a dream come true for me. I feel lucky, and I'm just thankful for being invited to this. Never ever did I think that donating would lead to this, and it just feels like a sequence of synchronicities has led me here. And so I want to start by saying thank you to Tom for putting the hard work in that it takes to maintain your level of conscious clarity. Thank you so much. Kudos to your teaching abilities and your never-ending work on my big toe. Your big toe, in parentheses, I wrote. And being such a fantastic guide, helping us all to reach our own. Thank you for providing the structure and the applicable tools in their simplest and truest form needed to find our purpose. Mine is to help and serve. I always knew this, but I didn't know this clearly before. This leads me to my most important question, because I had different questions to ask, but this one seems like the most important one. And right before I get to it, I wanted to say that I saw your volunteer video with Vanessa, and I kept putting myself out there to offer my help. And then all of a sudden I get this email from Keith and Donna that we're having this event, and it just seems appropriate for me to ask you, what can I do to help you on this path? Because I was born to serve, I was born to help, and this is what I know I'm supposed to do. Before I saw your video, I was already creating time-stamped, I was taking pictures of different times and different videos where people had asked me questions, and one specific friend was like, what do you think Tom would answer to this? And I was like, I have no idea, but maybe a couple of days later, I get the information on one of your videos. So you act like the LCS in so many ways, and it's just so awesome. And so I've been doing these little timestamp things. I want to offer that to you, as well as my artistic abilities, because I do love drawing, and I would just love to participate in any way I could. And yeah, so that's my question. What can I do for you? How can I serve you in all of this?
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
Great question. The first thing and most important thing that you can do is to work on getting rid of your fear, getting rid of your ego, getting rid of your beliefs, because that then will help the whole world grow up. Because as you grow up, it'll fix relationships in your life. It'll make other people happy. They'll have a higher probability of growing up. And where we really need to get to, where we need to go, is dependent more on each of us growing up than anything else. So that's the first most important thing to do, is just work on yourself, grow yourself up, be less self-centered, be more about what can you give, how can you help everything, everybody in all situations. So that's number one big thing. After that, if you want to contribute to the process of other people growing up through helping them get there through MBT, well, then we have lots of ways you can do that. And I'm not sure where on your map, but from where I'm sitting, 2 blocks over to your left, you'll find Sylvia. But if she's not there for you, she's probably someplace else. But there's Sylvia. And Sylvia is part of the organization of workers, as are other people, but Sylvia's here, and that's a face to look at. So I just, point her out to you for that. She has her finger on top of dozens of things that are going on. And it depends on how you most want the help. Yes, there's time stamping, but there's also, we're trying to put MBT into a format that's appropriate for, say, 8 to 12-year-olds and maybe 12 to 17-year-olds, so that they could get these concepts, so that parents would have something to work with in some way of explaining to their kids, and kids would find things interesting at this level about these concepts. So there's that sort of thing going on. If you're a techie, then there's all sorts of technical things to support things that's going on. But there's lots of ways in which you can be a part of this MBT happening to help spread these ideas to other people. And if you don't see the thing that you think you'd like to do, well, offer it, and we'll make a new path, a new line in what it is we're doing, and we'll probably put you in charge of it. And we'll put you to work that way. So if you see it, then join it. If not, we'll come up, be creative with how you could apply this, because that's part of what you get from involving a lot of people, is you get their creativity. It's not just soliciting, cogs to fit into your machine, but soliciting creativity to do things differently and in better ways. So yes, talk to Sylvia, and you can go offline here in the little chat section, and she'll give you a way to get in touch with her, and you can do that. But anyway, yeah, we welcome you. Some of these things we're doing just take a lot of people to do them. It's just too hard for a few people to do, but it's not that hard for a lot of people to do, and we welcome you.
I put my email in the chat for anybody else as well.
Hey, Sylvia. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Jesse. Likewise.
Can I show you guys something called evolution? It's a picture I drew. Can I show it to you guys?
Sure, absolutely.
Just to give you a little idea of kind of what I can contribute in, because I've been drawing pictures like this since I was little, and I'd never heard of a mandala before. And then when I showed this to somebody, they were like, "Oh, that's a mandala," and I'd never seen it before. And I'd been drawing them since I was little, which I thought, you know, was. And I've always had this intuitive knowing about reincarnation. But anyway, here's this. I wonder if you guys can see it. It just starts with the dot, and then it grows out all the way to the edges. And then this other one that I named individuated units of consciousness in honor of you. And it's just a bunch of them, and eventually they're all going to connect.
That's nice. So we have places for artists in our group. You know, when you talk about children's books, you're talking about art. When particularly the lower the age, you know, the more of it it's picture and less of it's words. And I at one time started to put together, and that project got about 2/3 done, but then got stalled for lack of time. But that is take all the best pieces out of MBT. So take that 800 pages and reduce it to 150 or 200 pages, all the most important phrases and things, sort of the sound bites, collect sound bites out of the whole book, and then make a picture book out of that, a book that would be maybe, 100, 150 pages, but it would be pictures mostly with little paragraphs floating here and there amongst the pictures. So art is a thing we can use. So Sylvia will connect you to all things MBT.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I have so many things scribbled down, and I can give you guys compliments just like left and right to all of you guys. And it's so cool. I'm so grateful to be a part of all of this. I really, really am. It's awesome.
Well, we're glad that you finally ended up here among us.
Yay! Thank you again.
Thank you, Jesse. That's incredible.
Bye, Donna. Oh, can I say one last thing? I mentioned it to you because the first person that popped up on the screen was Donna, and I mentioned to you that I love your voice. I've had experiences, and it's just so gentle and calming, like the LCS, or my version, in my experience, what I've experienced, and I won't get into that, but your voice is so calming, and you just have such a beautiful energy about you. I just feel it from all the way over here, and I just had to say it one more time so everybody knows. No.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Bye.
I have been known to be otherwise, but most of the time it's good.
Yeah, that's funny.
Much better these days. All right, Arthur. Arthur, please go ahead.
Okay, hello everybody.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi, would a highly developed free will awareness unit choose the best time to leave this body in order to optimize the next incarnation?
Possibly. Typically, the next incarnation isn't that time sensitive that it requires something right now, but if it did, then that could be arranged. Yes, it's probably not typical that your experience packet just runs until it runs out, until the avatar dies. That way you get everything out of it that you possibly could. But if there were overriding reasons to need to be on a particular timeline with the next experience packet, then that is a possibility in the margins. Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Short and sweet, Arthur. David, please.
So this is similar to what Jesse just asked about, where you talk about how can we contribute to the world on a greater scale, and you kind of turn us all to improving our own consciousness and lower the entropy and so forth. And I was watching a film recently called Thrive 2. It's kind of a film about some of the problems and challenges in the world politically and so forth, but also about different solutions to improve the world from where we stand. And they shared a quote there from Martin Luther King that I thought was interesting. I just wanted to get your perspective on it. And it sounds like, at least with the volunteers, and I'm one of the volunteers also, that we're building more of an organization to help promote or spread the word or whatever. But there's a quote I wanted to share and just get your take on it. And this is again from Martin Luther King, and it says, "Those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war." And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, how that relates to us individually. Obviously, we've got to work on ourselves constantly, but how about on a larger scale? How do you see that fitting?
Well, that I would agree with very much. As we evolve the quality of our consciousness as a race, Homo sapien, as we grow up, there's going to be any number of challenges and new ways of doing things, and new ways of creating economies, new ways of new economic systems, ways of thinking, new ways of arranging ourselves politically, cooperating. There's going to be a lot of things that will look very different to us. If we were to jump ahead to that point, we'd see that many of the things that are our institutions and the way we have organized ourselves will be very, very different when we become a higher quality of consciousness race. So partly thinking about these things is significant, thinking about how that might happen, putting ideas, floating ideas out there so people see potential solutions, even if they don't necessarily see how they're going to get from where they are to that solution. That's not so much the point even as it is that there are solutions. There are ways of being, ways of interacting that if you had a high quality of consciousness society, these ways would work well. Well, what ways? You see, let's be more specific. Let's come up with some of those ways. And it gives people something to look forward to. It gives people ways of working problems that when we get to the problem, we're not starting from scratch. We've already had a lot of thoughts about it. Maybe a lot of books written on it already. A lot of, different people thinking about it from their different perspectives. It's kind of the opposite of what we tend to do. Our management typically here is management by crisis. When we get to a crisis, then people start thinking, well, what are we going to do about the crisis? Well, often, if the crisis is here, the thinking about what to do about it should have happened a long time before that, and there wouldn't have the crisis. The crisis wouldn't be here had we thought ahead of time. But we tend to not do that. We ignore everything until there's a crisis. And when indeed there is a crisis, we start. And if we have to start from scratch, we're behind, because getting started is often a very lengthy process itself. Just getting people to think it's an idea we're thinking about, it takes time. So all the things, like you're talking about these ideas of a better way of performing economics, a better way of performing, political organization. Well, they're worth thinking about now, just so that the ideas are out there. So we don't have to start from scratch when we get to the point that we can actually use these. Now, with a very low quality of consciousness in our cultures, we're probably not going to use those things. And it'll be frustrating to the people who are thinking about them. They say, well, if we could just grow up and, care about each other, look, these processes would work great. But there's frustration because we're not that grown up yet. But it doesn't mean that it's not worth thinking about or planning or having discussions. All of those things are very valuable. Yes, the You have to organize peace, just like organizing war. Obviously, if you don't have a lot of organization, war doesn't happen. Well, it's sort of that way with peace. That if you wait until you need a new organization and you don't have one, your probability of going down 2 or 3 blind alleys first is a lot higher than if that ground has already been dug and plowed and thought about to where you kind of know what the right answer is. So it's very worthwhile. It's abstract and it's kind of in the future, but it needs to be considered and needs to be planned. Now, I'll also say, kind of in line with this, that no matter what political systems we have and no matter what economic systems we have, if we were to suddenly be a culture of high quality consciousness, those institutions would just automatically change all by themselves and morph into something that was more suitable, just because the people in them and the people accessing them would be different and would see things differently and would have different things that were important and different things that weren't important. So that will take care of itself. But it's helpful if we have some idea of where we might go and how we might get there, rather than having to make that up on the spot and make a lot of mistakes in the process.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.
All right, Chris is next.
Okay, so hi everybody. Hi Tom. Nice to be here. Thanks for your book and thanks for this forum. My question is about free will. If it has been asked and answered before on this platform or on another, then apologies. And also apologize for the long-winded nature of the question, but here goes. So I'm on board with the sort of consciousness being fundamental and with the process of evolution. They both seem to feel right or they are obvious to see. However, my problem comes in slightly with free will. I'm far from sure, based on my experience and on other things, I'm far from sure that we actually make any decisions. I know that goes against what most people think, but let me continue. I feel that we have many, many factors, influences, and processes going on under the surface of which we are completely unaware. And it is the eventual result of these processes that drives our behavior or our so-called decisions. So we would be more like automatons driven by our subconscious processes, and then our conscious mind takes ownership of those decisions sort of after the fact and cleverly convinces us that we were the author and in full control. An example of this would be they did some surgery on epileptic patients where they divided the brain hemispheres, and they would give an instruction to one of the brain hemispheres. The body would then carry out this instruction, and when the question was posed to the other brain hemisphere why the body had done that, the second brain hemisphere, who did not receive the instruction, instantly comes up with a very plausible but an untrue answer. Then also in a couple of videos, you've said things such as sort of like I think you mentioned whether it was a bee or some kind of insect makes choices, or that we choose to get angry when our partner presses our buttons. And I find the use of the word choose to be a strange one for me. To me, a bee is acting out of pure instinct, or maybe programming, if you will. And I have never personally had the experience of choosing how to react when my buttons are pushed. Reactions seem quite split second and quite reflexive and automatic. One more thing and then I'll wrap up. So there's something called the game of life, which, as I'm sure you know, is a sort of grid with squares that turn white or black according to a very simple rule set. Despite these simplistic rules and starting conditions, complex patterns emerge, entropy is decreased, order, variety, and complexity is created. Surely no one is arguing that these squares are making conscious decisions. Is it possible that PMR, at the very least, and perhaps even NPMR, function in the same way? In other words, is there an MBT model that works equally well, keeping the two fundamental assumptions, but without free will? And if not, how can I personally think about the concept of free will and about the word choose in a different way?
Okay, good question, Chris. Well, we'll do some of both. Yeah, the thing that you just referred to, in case everybody isn't familiar with that game of life, it's called cellular automata. And actually, cellular automata, when it comes to making conjecture about where consciousness comes from, cellular automata are right there, you know, in the middle of that discussion. So we can talk about that a little bit. But the idea that we have a lot of forces pushing us to make our choices is obviously true. Those fears are one of those sources. They push us to make choices. Advertisers are another. You know, our culture is another. We have all sorts of things that will limit our choices or perhaps put new choices in there that otherwise wouldn't be. We have, you know, let's say you commit a crime, you get put in jail. Well, now your choices have changed. Somebody's put you in jail, so you cannot go home for Christmas. You can't go take a walk outside in the park. You just are limited in the things that you can do. So free will does not mean that you get to do anything you want or that you get to do everything. It just means that of the things that you can do and of the choices that you are aware of, that you can make that decision, you can make that choice. So if there are, you know, you've come to a point where you can go right or left, then you get to choose right or left. Now, you'll think that, well, maybe I've got emotions that think that right is always better than left, in which case that's a belief. Right is better than left, so you'll go right because that's your belief that right is better than left. So that may be made out of a belief. Beliefs very much limit our choices. If we have beliefs, then we make those choices automatically. That belief is just like it being hardwired. You know, it's like an algorithm. If this, then that. So beliefs limit our choices. Fear limits our choices. If we have a fear that we are inadequate and we're very insecure and we think that you know, we're not very competent as a human being, then we'll choose not to go to that party. We'll choose not to be that social. We'll choose other things. And we choose that because of our fear. So there's lots of things that push us toward making specific choices. Okay. Now, the idea in MBT is that you grow up by getting rid of the fear, getting rid of the ego, getting rid of the beliefs. These are all things that can limit our choices. And by doing that, your decision space, which means that's all the things that you might choose and that you're aware of, only that you're aware of, that decision space will start to grow. And your free will choice then grows because you have more decision space to grow in. Now, there may be things that you're not aware of. I think I have 5 choices, but actually I have 60 choices. I just only know about 5 of them. There's other ones that are just not in my comprehension. I don't realize because of my culture, because of my beliefs, certain possibilities just aren't there. Well, my decision space is only those 5 choices. That's my decision space. So saying that there is free will doesn't mean that everybody makes every choice freely. Free will just means that there are choices that you are free to make. Okay. And that as you get rid of fear and ego and belief, you start freeing up more and more of the possible choices you could make and getting rid of the things that tend to make those choices for you. Get rid of those beliefs. So I would agree with you. The average person probably makes, 90% of all their choices out of fear, ego, and belief. That's what drives most of their choices. But they still have the free will to make a different choice. In other words, they can grow up. They can get rid of fear. They can get rid of ego and get rid of beliefs. So just because your habit is, or your belief is, that right turns are always better than left turns, you have a propensity to make right turns. But you have the ability to say, well, in this case, I'm going to see what a left turn does. And you make a left turn. You could do that. Now, you're not likely if you have a belief contrary to that, but you could. You have the ability. So the free will is an ability you have to make choices, whether you use it very often or not, or whether you let fear make your choice, or belief make your choice, or make your ego make your choice. Whether you're talked into things by advertisers or by, your culture or whatever else, okay, you can let yourself be talked into things, but that's also your choice. You don't have to have fear. You don't have to have ego. You don't have to have beliefs, and you don't have to pay attention to the people trying to tell you what to do and how to choose. You can do otherwise. So this concept of free will has to be seen as something it's an innate potential you have, but you have to develop it. You have to grow that decision space by growing up. But you always have free will, even if it's mostly theoretical, you might say, or mostly hypothetical, because you don't choose to use it very often. You choose to just choose out of belief. Well, I have a belief that I should get up every Sunday morning and go to church. So I do it because that's what my grandparents did, and my parents do that, and my children do that, and that's just what we do. Well, that's just a habit. That's another thing that limits our free will choices, our habits, you see. But I can always say, well, not this Sunday. Let's go fishing this Sunday. It's a thing I can do. I can change. I have that potential within me to make that choice. I'm not driven beyond hope of ever being able to do something differently. I'm just driven because I let that thing drive me. I let that fear drive me, or that attitude or that culture drive my choices. So I would submit that free will is a thing that goes with consciousness. Consciousness makes choices. Consciousness passes information and makes choices about that information. What to pass and who to pass it to are choices. And that they do have free will. In fact, free will is logically necessary for consciousness. Consciousness and free will and time are all logically necessary for each other. If there's a choice, then there's a before the choice and after the choice. If there's free will, then the choice is up to the consciousness. So though I admit that many people could have a lot more decision space than they do, they still have the potential to not do what that fear says, and not do what that culture says, and not do what their ego wants them to do, potentially. And growing up is the process of increasing your decision space. And that's partly why the world is in such a terrible position that it's in, is because we have a low quality of consciousness, which means people are not making very many of their choices. I mean, they are making it in the sense they're doing it, but they're not doing it willfully. They're doing it out of habit or out of necessity, however they view it. But they could make choices. And many of them do with some things. Some things don't have a lot of political or cultural overlay on them. They just are the way they are. How do you get home? When you leave work, there's at least 5 different ways you can go to get home. Which one do you choose? Well, you choose one because that's the safest has the slowest traffic, or you choose one because that's the quickest, or you choose one because that one goes by grandma's house, or you choose one because it's the most relaxing, or you choose it because you'd like to take a little longer because you're listening to audiobooks and you don't want to get home too quickly. You know, you have choices, and you make a choice. You decide. Do you go straight home, you know, maximum distance, maximum safety, maximum time with the book? You have those choices, and your culture and your advertisers and, you know, those things they don't come into play there, how you go home. They're not big players. Your culture isn't a big player in that. So that's the thing about choice. Choice is free. It has to be free. If it's not free, then consciousness really doesn't exist. If everything is determined, if all of it is deterministic, then there's no need for consciousness to make choices. Then there is no consciousness. There's no need for time, because time makes no difference. There is no change. Nothing can change. Everything's determined. It'll be exactly how it is. And all we're doing, we're just playing the role that's given to us. That would be determinism. And no need for time, no need for consciousness, no need for free will. All those things are irrelevant if you're in a deterministic world. It just happens because that's the way it has to happen and couldn't happen any other way. And we just pretend that we're making these choices, but we're just characters in a movie. And no more could that character in that 10-year-old movie decide to do something differently than we could. And you can think of that, but that is not what our experience tells us. Our experience tells us we can make choices. We can take the long road home to go by grandma and to listen to the audiobook. It's a choice. So if there are choices, then there's more than just that one. There's lots of choices we make. So that would be my concept. But now to get to the interesting thing about, the question, how did consciousness come to exist? Well, there's two concepts there, and one of them is cellular automata. Cellular automata is really a mathematics that has very simple rules, very simple rules, and it just follows those rules. So you set up the situation, you set up the rule set, you punch the button, and action happens according to the rules. And that action can be very varied. Indeed, it's been shown that cellular automata has the ability to act as a general purpose computer. In other words, you can compute just based on cellular automata. Cellular automata moves data from one place to another. Cellular automata can be made to be gates, AND gates, OR gates, if gates. All the logic required for a computer to compute. They have memory. They will store information. So not that it would be clever to make a computer that way. That would be a rather, odd way of going about making a computer. But it's just that they have those abilities to do those kinds of things. And it all comes from a rather simple set of rules and following those rules. Now, the other thing that's necessary is emergent complexity. Basically, what it is that if you have a potential, something that has the potential to become, then eventually it will. Okay, so if you wait long enough, something that has a potential to, I don't know what, do anything, eventually it will do something. Some of that potential will be realized. It may take a long, long time, but it's basically a statistical thing. If there is a potential for events to happen, then a system in which those events happen can eventually take place. If you go to Yeah, I think maybe it's Stanford, one of the big California institutions. And if you go to their philosophy department, they have all their departments online, and then you put in cellular automata, it'll take you to 20 or 30 pages of text on cellular automata and the concept that potential can actualize automatically. If there is potential for it to actualize, it will actualize in time. So, given those two things, then we have to start with a potential. We don't have to start with consciousness. We only have to start with a potential for consciousness, potential for awareness. And from that potential, you can have a little rule set will develop out of that potential. And that little rule set will then begin to derive logical consequences of things that are found within that potential. And pretty soon you can generate something that doesn't just generate and then disappear and generate again and disappear, but something that has longevity. It generates and stays and builds upon itself. And that is what Stanford said is the origin of consciousness. Those two factors. That out of just potential will emerge complexity. Well, complexity is information. Complexity is form. You build something. And sometimes that complexity doesn't just melt back into nothingness. It actually builds on itself and builds on itself. And then you have structure and reasons for that structure. And it can eventually build cellular automata because that's just a simple thing. And between the two of them, you can end up with something that is self-aware. It is no doubt conjecture. This is not a deductive, logical reasoning sort of thing. It's just conjecture. But it's probably the best conjecture we have is where consciousness came from. But now that you have consciousness, you have to have free will and you have to have time. Otherwise, if you don't have those, then you have determinism. And in fact, you will find that many scientists who first they become materialists, and then because of being a materialist, you also have to be a determinist. If you think that the physical world is just a big machine and it's just a rule-based machine, then if you know where all the players are and where all the everything is at a particular time, you'll be able to, from then on, calculate what will happen next. So that brings you to determinism. So it's typical that scientists are both materialists and determinists. And for that reason, you will have scientists saying that there is no such thing as consciousness, there is no such thing as time, and there's no such thing as free will. So those two things are opposite corners of the philosophical landscape of what ontology, of being, of existence. Epistemology too, I guess. So you have in one corner determinism, materialism, in the other corner you have free will, consciousness, and time. And those, each one sees the other as a hallucination. In other words, the free will and time and consciousness sees the idea of determinism as just a hallucination. Okay, it looks like things are deterministic, but they're not really. It just looks that way. And from the viewpoint of determinism and materialism, well, okay, it looks like we have a consciousness and we have free will, but we really don't. It's just a hallucination. So those two things are opposite and incompatible with each other. Science finds itself in determinism and materialism. So it's interesting you mentioned the cellular automata because many people do have the conjecture that that was the origins of something that became self-aware.
Okay.
So does that help? Does that kind of set it
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
context?
It does. A few things you said there just made a slight shift. I think maybe I don't have to think of the free will concept as binary. Either you have 100% free will or zero free will. There's sort of a
Exactly.
sliding scale, and the more someone is driven or controlled by underlying fears, the more they will act like an algorithm, and the more they can get rid of those fears, the more they will act like a free will being, I guess. So it's more like a sliding scale.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's
One
not
could
as
almost, sorry,
yeah.
one
Yeah.
could almost say that free will and fear are opposites.
Absolutely. Free will, just like, yeah, they're not direct opposites, but they are definitely correlated oppositely. Where you have one, you have, where you have more of one, you have less of the other. Absolutely.
No, that helps. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Luis, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Donna. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. I will read my question. Recently, I had a fear test, sort of an experience in which I was held hostage for around an hour. I was told to face the wall in a corner and stay there. While I was there, my response to fear was to get into point consciousness and repeat myself, I am, which let me keep calm and accept things as they were happening. So that for me shows progress on my growth towards love, because I honestly feel no resentment or any negative thought towards those guys armed with guns. Anyway, at some point I thought that there was a real chance for that to be the last moment of this experience package, trying to prepare myself for the gunshot, leave no witness kind of thing that I had in mind, that they had in mind. I noticed, however, that within the open space experience of myself, there was a thread of avatar identity attachment that was calling for panic, some leftover wood that was enough to lead a huge fire. And that stayed with me on my PTSD response for these couple of weeks. Part of a poem expresses this feeling. It says, "No creature's self can be admitted here, where all identity must disappear. But should one part remain, a single hair will drag you back and plunge you in despair." So my question is, Tom, my path towards getting rid of fear is clearly working, but what about this single hair that it doesn't seem so small now that I'm talking about? It's pretty big. So it's kind of an elusive, resilient belief. One could call it a doubt about the true nature of the avatar. It seems almost untouched by what we call evidence of a larger reality, in my case at least, but enough to lead the fire of panic from scratch. What would you suggest?
With time, you'll get more and more solid in your feeling of what is real and what isn't, what you can control and what you can't. And to maintain that lower entropy takes work, takes effort. So it's not that you shouldn't expect to be able to put yourself in a place where there will never be a fear, where there will never be doubts, where there will never be, that hair that remains behind. That's probably always going to be there, and it's probably always going to develop. But you have to keep putting effort in to this growing up thing. It's not a get there and you're done. It's a keep working at it. So you're always going to have things that want to drag you back. You're always going to have something that's going to want to, I don't know, put you into fear, put you into ego, put you into belief. They will be there. And as you fall into those pits, you'll recognize it and you'll go, oh, yeah, this is not a good place for me. I need to, work myself out of that. And that is a constant and perpetual process that doesn't end. So I think, yes, there is always that little thread that's going to be there that will potentially pull us back, and that's okay. We can deal with it. And as it happens, we'll deal with that. And as time goes on, we'll get better and better at that, to where that thread will disappear and some other little thread will be there to take its place. And we'll work on that, and that one will disappear and some other thing will take its place. Because we constantly have to work at being low entropy. Low entropy is not a natural state in the sense that it just will exist there. It's not an equilibrium state that'll exist there without effort, without energy being put into it. It's something you have to become. It's something that you have to continually become. Not an endpoint that when you get there, you're like a rock at the bottom of the hill, There's nothing that's going to move you anymore because every direction from where you are is uphill, so you're stuck right there. It's not like that. You're always going to have challenges, things that will challenge who you are and what you are. And the idea is not to get past the point of having challenges, but to get to the point that you can always deal with the challenge as it happens. Says, all right, I can deal with a challenge. That sounds like a pretty heavy challenge you had there. It challenges everything, but you get to the point that you say, what is going to happen is going to happen. And there isn't anything I can do about it. And losing my mind, becoming panicky or whatever, is not part of the solution. That's just not it. Matter of fact, the more you stay still and quiet, the less panicked will be the guy with the gun, and the more likely he will walk out without having to kill everybody. But if you panic him, then he's liable to shoot people in panic. So your panic would become part of the problem. You see, it would become part of the issue. So you did what was the best thing. You meet the bear in the woods, you try to be intelligent about how you act. And indeed, you acted intelligently, and the whole situation went away, and now here you are. So that's the best we can do. And to realize that life is going to present us with these things from time to time is okay. It's not like, why did this happen to me? Stuff like that happens, and sometimes it happens to you. And when it does, you will do the best you can to make the best choices. And that doesn't mean that you'll necessarily have it come out the way you could have done perfectly, and for some other reason still gotten shot. But at least you do the best you can. No guarantees ever in life. Life is risky. But you do the best you can, and then you let it go to be whatever it comes out to be, because it's outside of your ability to control. And you did that fine. So I'd mark that up as a big success, not a failure that you still had this thread that drug you back into fear, but rather you had something that you dealt with, and you dealt with it well. Wasn't easy, might have been right on the edge, but still you dealt with it. And that's what's important. So I'd say that's the way to look at these things. Not that you are going to get away from that ever happening, but because you'll deal with whatever happens. And you have no choice but to accept things that are outside of your control. So does that help any?
Yeah,
Lewis?
Really, it really helps. Thank you, Tom. Makes me feel way better about, as you were saying, the way that I dealt with it, and seeing it as an opportunity for growth and for learning.
Yeah.
And be willing to do it again and again and again as it comes to you.
As it comes to you. And every time it'll be different, in a different form. That thread's gone. You probably won't be in that one again, but there'll be something else, that will challenge you. And you just meet that challenge. Say, well, okay, what's my best move here? What's my low entropy move? And you make your move, and what happens, happens.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. A lot of this has to do with letting go of the need to control things. There's a lot of things you just can't control.
Thank you, Louise. Justin, you haven't asked a question yet. We're going to try to squeeze in as many as we can. We've got 3 left, but I'll let you go ahead first, Justin.
Okay, thank you. So my question's pretty short. It should be pretty short. It's just on something called, well, that I think it's called same state memory. And sometimes when I'm just getting tired or like winding down for the day, it can even happen when I'm standing in the shower at night. I just, all of a sudden I'll find myself back in a dream that I might have had 5 years ago. You know, sometimes it can be, you know, a dream from the night before, or it can be years ago that I didn't remember up until that point. And so I'm just curious why that is. And when I do experience that dream, it's like a whole flood of dreams from that night come back into my memory. So it usually just happens when I'm getting tired or winding down for the night. So I'm just curious about that.
Okay. Well, what happens when you're winding down and getting tired is you become more open. You know, you're not doing, you're just letting go of everything. And when you let go, that leaves a space, an empty space. And your mind just happens to think about that dream or that experience or something similar to that, something that triggers that thought of that dream. And then once you get that trigger, then you get the landslide, you know, everything then loads in behind it. So I suspect it's just a very casual thought about something that reminds you of something that reminds you of, oh, that dream. And then boom, you know, all that comes out, pours out while you're sitting there. And of course, you probably shake it off after a few moments of going through it. You kind of shake it off, get back to what's going on. But those are just times when you are open to anything. You're just open. And any little tiny thought can trigger a landslide. And it may not be, you know, there may not be any particular significance about why that dream. Maybe there was some unfinished or unsettled thing there, or maybe it just, that dream reminded you, just was an association in your mind that you were thinking about something that was, maybe it was even in a movie that you had seen, who knows? And then it reminded you, because in your memory, you've got all these memories, and these memories have associations. And maybe a movie you saw or somebody told you about, then triggered an association that triggered an association with that dream. And then that's something that you've got a lot of in that memory. So all of that just comes back in. But kind of free association memory is what's going on. And it happens to you in those states because those are the states where you're not in control of it. You're just open to whatever happens. And sometimes it's entertaining. Sometimes those kinds of states will give you right answers. If you happen to have in your mind at the same time some real important issue you're dealing with, sometimes answers will come in those little spaces. You know, they can be good for that too. And sometimes just nonsense will fill them up.
So is that like the state you would normally be in when you're open all the time?
Yeah.
To just be able to receive?
You'd probably be in something similar to that, except you'd have a little more structure on it because you'd be living a life that required some structure. So yeah. You'd structure it around what you were doing, and you'd turn it off when it became annoying and turn it on when it wasn't. And your intention would reach out and grab things as you needed them. And yeah, it'd be something like that where you're open all the time, but your thinking is what's guiding your intentions. So then it's not so haphazard then. What you're experiencing is just kind of one-offs, haphazard. But yeah, that's just what it is when you're just open and it's like you turn your radio off, you just spin your dial and then you plug it in and see what's playing. You know, it's that sort of thing.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Donna, you said there was two more. Let's work those two off.
All right. Our next anonymous question. I was hoping to get some advice about challenges for an autistic person. Recurring panic attacks, often attributed to sensory overload, and neurological resistance to change. Is there a way to modify these things or accept and ride them out?
Well, you should do both. You should realize that they just do happen. If you're autistic, these things will happen, and you shouldn't be angry or upset with yourself that they do happen. Because as soon as you become negative about yourself, then you're going to cause a whole lot more dysfunction is going to follow. So step one is to just accept that that is the way it is. You got your neurology is different, or whoever this person is, the neurology is different, and you're going to have different, you're going to have different things. You're going to act differently and respond differently to things, and be okay with that. Accept it as okay. So first thing is just accept it. But secondly, you can do something about it with a strong intent. With a strong intention to change it, you can modify the physical body. You can modify that neurology. You're not stuck with that same neurology working the same way forever. Your biology is not so hard and fast that you are stuck with it. Now, there may be boundaries, hard and fast, that you have to work within. Like if you only have, one arm, then there's certain things you're not going to be good at. Like playing baseball, is not going to be your best game. So you have to realize that. But that doesn't mean that you don't learn how to play catch, that you can't throw a ball around. That doesn't mean that you can't do other kinds of sports or other things. So use your intention to broaden the space that which you operate in. You can change things just with a strong intention. And yes, she had good teachers, and yes, she had parents that were encouraging her, but those aren't necessary. They're nice and they're helpful, but they're not necessary. You can do it on your own. If you have an intention to learn certain controls of things, or to stop things, or to see things that are not productive and stop them and do things that are productive, you can generate that. And it won't be easy, but you can do it just with an intention, a strong intention that I want to change in this way. And that you are not a slave to your biology is something to keep in mind. The mind leads, the body follows. You can get a lot more out of your biology if you use your intent to change it. So it just takes time, and you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to realize that you'll work on something, it'll seem to be doing good, and then it'll regress. Well, that's the way life is. It's like that. Don't let that knock you off of your, of your goal of just keep working at it and keep working at it. And eventually you'll find that there's a lot you can do to modify the biology that you start with. An awful lot that you can do. And you're not helpless with it. So focus on little steps. Don't focus on one giant leap, because that's hard to do. And then you get frustrated before you get there. So focus on little steps, just doing this little thing, just a little better. And after you get that, then the next thing and the next thing. And I suspect you'll find that there's really very little limitation to what you can do and the way that you can be if you set your mind to it.
All right, Tom, there's just a follow-up to this question. The questioner wants to clarify a point. If I do find that there is only so much resistance to change I can give, it doesn't mean all the work I put in is a failure. It would be just the rule set limit, correct?
It's possible. Yes, that's possible. But I wouldn't give up to that possibility until I've tried very, very, very hard, for a long time, because you don't want to give that up if it's not true. But if you do run into a wall like that, and you've tried lots of ways and you just feel like, well, you just can't get there, then accept that's okay. It's the way I am. It's my authentic self, and that's the way I'll be. And I'll accept it, and I'll be happy with it. I won't feel negative about me, because that creates lots and lots of problems. Feeling positive about you creates lots and lots of fixes. And being negative about you creates lots and lots of problems. So you don't want to get negative. You want to always stay positive. And other people will just need to deal with you the way you are and who you are. And they'll just have to learn to accept it. That's their lessons to learn, their opportunities to grow up. You see, it's like all of us, you're not only you're not only trying to grow yourself up, but everyone is really a teacher for everybody else that's in their life. You help other people grow up and help other people deal with things. So all that's very important. So yes, it'll be however it is, and you just stay authentic. You are who you are, and feel good about that, and life goes on. Stay happy. Don't get into feeling negative.
One more, Shirley.
Hi, Tom. I actually have 10 more questions to pop. Just pop one more this time. So it's also part from your book, which question came to me as I was reading it. So on page 333, you say consciousness is energy, digital energy, the energy of organization. So my question is, since AUO is a finite system, so is its energy also finite? So does the conservation of energy apply to the AUO? And if it's finite, so theoretically, does that mean the total energy of AUO can be calculated, like theoretically calculated? And is the energy growing or constant? So if it's constant, then how does it copy and paste itself?
Yeah, no, it's growing. Yes, it is finite. It's not infinite. It's you might say its number of potential bits is limited as an information system. And yes, it is that energy is growing as its entropy is lowered, which means as its information is developing. So as it lowers its entropy, it has more structure, it has more meaning, more content, and that meaning and content is, you can think of that as energy, if you like. Now, energy is a metaphor for something that can change something else. Energy has the power to change. If you have no energy, then you can't change anything. Okay, so energy is required to modify, change, grow, become. All of that takes energy. And for a consciousness system, it grows, it gains energy, or gains its capacity to change things, and the capacity to be more valuable, more have more meaning, more significance as it lowers its entropy. So think of these terms kind of metaphorically, not in terms of something particularly physical.
No. I'm just experimenting all these things conceptually in my head. So I'm just trying to. So does that mean the bits of data is limited? Like, so there's certain set number of bits of data, and then it's originally random, then it just kind of organizes itself and become more patterned?
Yes, that's exactly the way to think of it. And it may find ways to make more bits. Who knows? Maybe it'll take every bit, whatever a bit is, and break it in two, and now it'll have 2 bits. You don't really know. Exactly how it works. So it may, but there's some limit. There's some limit to it.
Yeah.
It's not infinite. There's nothing about it that is infinite. It is a system that is finite.
So also following up this question, so if zero entropy is asymptotic, does that mean 100% entropy is also asymptotic? So it's basically, it's like a S kind of curve. So like either end doesn't really exist. It just kind of approaches if it ever happens to go either way.
Well, no, you can get to, if you have, well, let me put it this way. So you're talking about when you have 100% or zero entropy,
Yeah,
or you have infinite entropy.
Yes. Yes.
So you're looking
you know how you're saying we always have to keep on working on ourselves because
right.
Zero entropy. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get to zero entropy. You can only
Yeah.
get asymptotic means you can approach it. You can get closer and closer and closer, but you can't actually get there.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to keep putting energy in. But on the other side, if you de-evolve to where your entropy gets higher and higher and higher, for a system, there will be some maximum amount of entropy. And that is when all the bits are random.
So it can't be 100%. So it can
that is defined as 100%.
Yeah.
When all the bits are random, see, entropy is something you define for a system.
Yeah.
So first you have to have a system, and then within that system, maximum entropy is all the bits are random.
Yeah.
And that's as much entropy as you can get. You can't get any more entropy than that.
Yeah.
That's the max.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's not asymptotic then. So that
no, it just goes to a maximum. It doesn't go asymptotic. It goes to a specific value.
Okay. So it doesn't go approach 100% entropy. No. Not like 0% entropy it approaches.
No, see, you're thinking if it does exactly the same and goes asymptotic. No, you can get there. All you need is all the bits to be random, and you are at that high point. You're there, period. And unless those bits get ordered again, then it stays there.
Yep.
But you can never get to the zero entropy. That requires effort.
Okay. Yep. Just one last question on the AUO. So you're saying the AUO is immortal, but isn't immortality a similar concept to infinity? It's like, you're always adding delta T so that if it hasn't come to an end, it doesn't mean that there's no end?
Well, no, it's like this. It's open-ended.
Okay.
Evolution is open-ended. So evolution continues to evolve until it runs out of states. In other words, it has ways that it can change, things that it hasn't done before, ways that it can change, different situations, different configurations. And within all those possibilities, it can continue to evolve to more and more profitable states for the system. Now, if you get to a point that there are no more states, you have changed and rearranged and assessed and organized in every possible way, then it would stop, and the system would not continue. But an open-ended system means that it just keeps on changing. And when you have a system that has, well, right here on this planet, we have 7.5 billion entities with free will, and the number of ways, permutations, and combinations you can get out of something like that is just so huge that it doesn't seem that it will ever stop. But because it keeps changing, you see, as it changes, it creates more possibilities. So as we get a change here, let's say we have an internet. Now that you have an internet we didn't have before, there's a whole new set of possibilities it didn't even have before. And as we create the next thing, so the number of possibilities just keeps growing as we keep organizing more and more effectively.
I was thinking about more in terms of like an exogenous, like existential threat, like, if a meteorite strikes the planet, then this, our Earth will be, finished. But so we don't know what's happening outside the AUO. Then in that case, we wouldn't.
The AUO then, it's got that simulator that it's using, that virtual reality simulator it's using as an entropy reduction trainer for consciousness, just goes offline. So it gets hit by a big meteor, it's done. You don't have that trainer anymore. that means you build another trainer, or you've got 2 or 3 other trainers that are also running in parallel, and you just shift people over to those trainers. Or because it's digital, it's being computed, it's not really physical, you just go back to a certain amount of time before that meteor hit and restart there.
Yeah, I know
Without the
we're still
meteor.
within this. Yeah, we're still talking within the system. I'm just saying
Right.
if the AUO, but then that's just too out there. It's not relevant to to our little lives. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Tom.
Okay.
I have more questions, but I think it'll take too long for discussion. But anyway,
We're running a little bit over, but thank you, Shirley.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you everyone for all your wonderful questions. This was a fantastic session. A great group. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great questions. Really great questions. They were all very, very fundamental, and I think things that other people will be really interested in listening to. Yeah, thank you so much for your contributions. That helps us immensely. And thank you for coming to this and asking great questions. Tom Campbell here. MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.